Hi everybody, welcome and thank you for joining me today. My talk will be on migrating your Angular applications to the latest and greatest technologies available. So it will not be about signal-based APIs only. There are a lot more fresh features that you can migrate to in the newest Angular versions. Before we continue, very short, who am I? My name is Sam and I've been playing with the web as a software engineer for more than 15 years now. My sole focus has always been on the development of the internet, and that focus experience brought me to my current position as a front-end engineer at Core Financial. Can we switch to the slides, please? Yes, thank you. So where was I? Yeah, I was telling that focus experience brought me to my current position as a front-end engineer at Core Financial. Core is a promising fintech startup based in the US, and we are already expanding globally. I also serve as a GDE, which is short for Google Developers Expert, and that means that I do work in support of the web and Angular communities by organizing, teaching, writing, and mentoring other developers. And last but definitely not least, together with my partner Zoe, we manage a household of 4, including 2 hyperactive and very exhausting boys called Milo and Max. If you want to learn more about me, please check out my website. And to end my introduction, just a little bit about our company Innovatus that I've been running together with Jürgen since 2016. With Innovatus, we mainly work around initiatives in the community of Angular developers, like, for example, the Angular Belgium meetup group and the yearly NGBE conference. And through our initiatives over the years, we have facilitated training for thousands of engineers in Angular and related web technologies in and around Belgium. Of course, with the help of some amazing people, of which you can see some in the picture here. So, nowadays, migrations are basically an essential part of any modern web development framework. But before we dive deeper into the Angular migrations, let's briefly talk about what migrations actually are. How do they help keep our applications healthy? And how do they fit into the strategy of the Angular framework? So, in IT, we generally refer to migrations when we are moving the operations, any form of operations from one system to another. So, for example, when an old legacy system is not maintained anymore, and its data or its software needs to be transferred or migrated to a new system. The new system should then be capable of handling the current requirements, but potentially also any other future requirements. And these systems, they are rarely one-to-one transferable, so from old to new. So typically migrations involves some sort of modifications to the data, to the code, or any upgrade to the software. So migrating is not just about moving operations, but also making sure that that whatever is being migrated keeps working as before on the new system. And in the context of our Angular code bases, migrations are not moving data between systems, but they are upgrading our source code, and potentially also any configuration that we might have for any developer tooling that we're using. So with that process, we want to make sure that the code that we had before is at least working as before, and potentially even better afterwards. And that's one of the reasons why Angular has a very regular, predictable, and reliable release frequency. Every 6 months, a new major version of Angular is released, and currently we are at version 18. That means that long-term support is including version 16 to version 18. Important security releases will be patched on each of those major versions that are in long-term support. So it's good to be aware that version 15 got kicked out of long-term support already, and with version 19 on the way, version 16 is also about to be out of long-term support soon. So with every upgrade also comes the opportunity to run migrations on our code base. And mostly those migrations are optional, and you will need to approve running them as part of your update process. You might ask yourself, why is this optional? Well, Angular typically releases new features in a non-breaking fashion. So it always does that across it always releases or removes features across multiple major releases. And that means that if a specific part gets deprecated, they are deprecated at least a few major versions before they will get removed. And that allows you to keep using deprecated features for the time being, which will give you a big enough of a window to prepare for a full upgrade to those new features or to remove old features. And if specific parts get removed through an upgrade, Angular will most likely provide you with an auto-migration or provide any migration for you to run when you are updating through the CLI. On the other end, new features are released as developer previews, so you can test them out before they're fully released, but without any guarantees. So, Santosh already touched this. How can you keep your Angular dependencies up to date? There are various ways to do that. For that, let's consider NPM, the Node Package Manager, as an example. So keep in mind that there are probably similar commands available for any of the package managers that you might use, PNPM or Yarn, for example. And if you want to focus on updating your Angular-related dependencies, you can use ng-update through the Angular CLI. And if you use NX, you want to migrate to the latest and the greatest, you can use npx nx migrate latest. So those two commands focus, however, on Angular and or NX-related dependencies. So you might want to use some other tools as well, like, for example, npm outdated. npm outdated will list all your current dependencies and their wanted and latest versions available. And if you just want to go, I have a screen. Gives me some time to drink. Yes, we're back. Okay. Will not touch it. Oh. So I can just talk. So if you want to just go ahead and update your dependencies, you can also use just the npm update command. It will just update all of your dependencies. But for Angular and NX, you will want to use the first two commands. So because under the hood, they include more operations, like, for example, those migrations that we just previously discussed. Also, any other third-party dependencies, like, for example, Storybook, they also provide commands to automatically upgrade to newest versions. So it's always good to check any of the tools that you're using for available update or migration commands. And if you use NX-supported tools like Storybook, those commands or updates are typically part of the migration process of NX. So NX has got you covered on that. So for the seasoned Angular developers out there, you might remember these past migrations in Angular. At some point, the lovely folks from the RxJS team decided that they were moving from dot chaining operators to using pipeable operators instead. And I will not go into too much details here, but basically the goal for this migration was to clean up the observable prototype and make sure that you can import the operators, meaning that you need to import less code. So it's better for the end result of your bundle. But now imagine that you need to do those changes to all of those occurrences manually in your code base. I think some people, some developers might have done this manually, but at that time, I was very grateful for having this command because I was working on such a big project that I was very happy I did not need to do that manually. Another example was a more straightforward and simple migration. When migrating to Angular version 11, the Angular team automatically replaced any view encapsulation native encapsulation option to use the Shadow DOM encapsulation option automatically. I can just continue those slides. I'll just talk. So a last and more recent example was the standalone migration that was available from version 15.2. And that one is another example of a migration that can make very big changes to your code base because basically it removed all ng modules in the provided path, and by doing so potentially touched all parts of your application. So therefore it came as a 3-step migration with 3 modes where we first converted all our components to standalone, including also directives and pipes. And after that we had to remove any unnecessary ng modules. And finally, it gave us the possibility to switch to the standalone bootstrapping API to make the entire application standalone. I don't know what's wrong. But yeah. Okay, I'll just talk. Anyway, I can share the slides afterwards, so you can memorize all what I'm saying now and then put it on the slides yourself. So, okay, so I was at first converting all our components and directives to standalone. So that was the first mode of that migration. And then after that, we had to remove any unnecessary ng modules, which was a second mode. And finally, the last mode gave us the possibility to switch to the standalone bootstrapping API to make the entire application standalone. Okay, so there have been other automatic migrations over the years. There are too many to discuss right now, but as you might know, the Angular.dev website has an upgrade guide available. So if you take the first version to be version 2 and the last version to be version 18, you can get the whole list of all changes that were done manually, that you had to do manually or were done automatically when you upgraded between versions. So for this, it would be good if I have my slides available on the screen, but perhaps I can try and switch to just HDMI. Okay. But that's fine. That's fine. I can. Yeah, that's fine. Shall I plug it in, or because I can just pull it out here and put it in my laptop? Ah, okay. Yeah. So I'll take the opportunity to make do some marketing for the NGBE conference end of this year. We're organizing our 7th edition, so we will have great speakers. I can give you already like an early insight that Minko Gechev will be joining us again this year. He was one of our first speakers in our first edition, and at that time he was still I wanted to say just an Angular community member as a GDE, but now he's the product lead for the Angular team. So we are very glad that he will be joining us again end of this year. So if you're interested in joining us. We also have 5 workshops available. They will be the day before the conference on the 5th of December. And again, as always, we have an amazing lineup like Manfred Steyer, Michael Latke, Stefan Baumgartner, who will be giving an amazing TypeScript deep dive workshop, Brecht Bier giving a workshop about also about Angular architecture. And NX will be joining us, the NX team. They will give a workshop on some advanced NX concepts. Perfect. So these are the 3 modes that I just talked about. You will need to do this migration step by step. First is to convert to standalone, then prune all the ng modules, and then make sure that your application bootstraps as a standalone application. And this is a screenshot of the update guide, where I don't show the full list because that would not fit on the screen. But if you pick from version 2 to version 18, you will get the full list of things that changed over the years. So now that we have some idea about how migrations fit into our Angular ecosystem, let's take a look at some of the latest migrations and also quickly peek at what's coming next. Let's start with the inject function. And I will not go into too much details about why you might prefer the inject function over constructor-based injection. But if you're still in your thought process, here are my thoughts. So first of all, you won't be needing the constructor anymore in your components. And it's also very descriptive and explicit code. So it really, in this case, it really reads like you're injecting some dependency into your class, as opposed to constructor-based injection, where the injection process is more of a in the background kind of process. It's a lot more implicit. So the inject function can also be used in functions outside of classes as well, as long as they run in an injection context. For example, router guards or factory functions when you are providing your dependencies, those are injection context. And if you're not running in an injection context, you can still do it with a helper function called run in injection context, but you will be needing to pass the injector as well, so you will at some point need to be able to inject stuff. And here we see the result from running the migration command, just using the default options. But if you have some special cases, like, for example, depending on non-nullable injection tokens, or when you are migrating abstract classes, or when you migrate components that use inheritance, the migration has got you covered as well. But anyways, it's always good that you want to make sure to do proper testing and do quality checks after migration. And it's very good to note here that both methods are still fully valid. So it's more of a personal preference or a project level kind of agreement that you need to come up with. But if you're convinced and you have formed your own sense of preference, you can just use the inject migration to automatically migrate to the inject function. And if you don't have the time, or you're just feeling good with the current approach, don't touch it. So now let's check out the control flow migration. Again, the goal of this talk is not to convince you to migrate to the new control flow, just teaching you how to do it if you would like to. But if you want some key differences and benefits, I will give you some. Well, first of all, the new control flow is baked into Angular, so there's no more explicit need to import those structural directives like ngIf and ngFor. So it cleans up a bit your components. And it's also another improvement to readability. There's no more need for you to put invisible elements like ngContainer to wrap around a block of elements or components. And there's also been reported gains in performance. So if you're going deep on performance, you might have some gains there. So here we see the result of running the migration command. The migration command will also ask you to reformat your templates so that everything is still properly indented and it still looks good. And as you can see here, no more need for invisible elements like ngTemplate afterwards. We see this again here, where we do not need it's obviously a very simple example, but in any case, you will come into situations where you need something like ngContainer, but with the new control flow syntax, you don't need that anymore. And apart from the syntax changes, all functionality at 4 is preserved from the ng4 directive. I think I forgot to mention something. As part of the migration, those imports, ng4, ngIf, they are also automatically removed from your components. Then in Angular version 17.1, signal inputs were introduced to allow developers to create more declarative and reactive code patterns and to make it easier for you to transition. The ng extension team has published schematics that automate the code migration process. Well, how does this work? Well, as soon as you run the schematics, the schematic will scan your code base for any decorators with inputs and automatically convert them to signal inputs. By doing that, the input names, types, default values, they will all be preserved. But you need to keep in mind that input setters will not get replaced. Those kind of setters will most likely require an input transform function or an associated computed signal that makes the necessary changes. In Angular version 17.3, a new output function was introduced. It was designed to align more closely with the input function and lay the foundation for signal components. And to assist with this transition, the ng extension team has released schematics to handle the code migration automatically for you. So same idea applies here. The decorators for output are looked up during the schematic run, converted to signal-based outputs, preserving output names, types, and default values. Good to note is that typically outputs use event emitters, but some people might also just use observable-based outputs. Those are also updated using that schematic. Then, to create a more unified experience with signals, Angular 17 also introduced signal-based queries, replacing the old decorator-based approach. And the same applies here. Query names, types, defaults stay the same. And the last point basically applies to everything in your to outputs, inputs, and queries. Component templates will also be updated. Again, setters are also not updated automatically, so you will need to check those. If you have any queries that use setters, you need to do that manually. So here we can see an old way of declaring inputs, outputs, and template queries with the aliases required transform function, for example, which will magically migrate to the new syntax when you run those commands, preserving all of the options. Then there are other interesting migrations currently available, and there are even more upcoming. So for example, the route lazy load migration, it will convert any route component that is currently eagerly loaded into a lazy loaded route component. That means that it will not be included in your final bundle anymore, and it will be exposed or built as a separate chunk, which will be loaded dynamically as soon as you request it. From version 19 on, a standalone will be default. So standalone default migration will be a rather big change. It will be touching all of your components, and potentially still all of the ng modules that you will have left, because any component that will be declared in an ng module will receive the standalone false flag. So it will be explicit standalone false, but it will remove standalone true flag, which will become an implicit setting or a default setting. And besides that, while preparing this talk, I took a peek in the Angular code, and it appears that the Angular team is working on native signal input, output, and query migrations. So I will probably need to update my slides very soon, because that means that you will not be needing the ng extension package anymore for those migrations. So let's wrap up for today with a quick overview. We learned that migrations are great for automatically updating our projects to modern technologies, and they are an essential part of modern web frameworks. Those migrations are part of releases of the Angular framework, so you need to think about and put a proper update strategy or upgrade strategy in place for your project. And in general, that means you should be able to upgrade timely. You'll need to manage your dependencies and be mindful about which dependencies that you rely on. For the required migrations, the Angular team will have us covered, and for other migrations, we can rely on the community, for example, the ng extension package. Those migrations allow us to automatically migrate, like, for example, the new control flow and the signal-based inputs, outputs, and queries. And last but not least, keep putting trust in the framework. More Angular goodness is coming, and Angular is here to stay. If you want to learn more about all of this and get a reference to the commands that I used and showed with examples, you can check out my website for the related blog post about all of this. And thank you, What the Stack team, for the invite, Kirill for supporting me through the process, and if you have any questions, please let me know.